Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Well, what a sad and tragic day yesterday. Less than a week since we shared with you a film that captured 2 years of construction at the new Everton football stadium. We all agreed it was an epic undertaking and a superb piece of modern construction. But all of that was thrown into sharp relief yesterday when work was halted on the project following the death of a young worker on the site. Now, aside from the fact that he reportedly died from severe head injuries, we have no actual details, so I'm certainly not going to speculate in any way. I think Lang O'Rourke are right to have suspended work at the site. I also think Everton have acted admirably in their condolences, but the fact remains that a young guy, 26 years old apparently, has lost his life in this industry of ours. What a tragic and wholly avoidable loss of life. I'm not going to say my thoughts are with the family or with his family and friends. It's too trite, and the last thing they need right now are meaningless words from a complete stranger. My thoughts right now are how long will it take the HSE to pour over this one? Will the industry actually learn any lessons from it? When will construction appear on the evening news for something actually positive? And perhaps biggest question of all, when will a site death be the last site death? Now, without further ado, I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show on the road. I'm just going to throw over to the chat. Peter McKenna, morning, Peter, says, shame, just another soul lost on a UK construction site. And that, unfortunately, is the overriding point, I think, in all of this. Just another lost soul. I don't know if the name of the individual that has died has been released yet, but he will just join a long list of those lost souls that have perished on UK construction sites. And aside from his family and his friends and his colleagues, give it 6 months and nobody will remember his name at all. It will just fall out of the headlines. Now, it is Tuesday, the 15th of August. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. In today's show, work is halted on the new Everton football stadium following the death of a construction worker. We'll be having more details on that in just a second. Armac clears the way for HS2. Wirtgen brings dreams of autopilot to reality, and embodied carbon concerns could stop the demolition of the former Shell headquarters in Aberdeen. Plus, Volvo and the sound of silence. We'll get to all that in just a second. But first, let's peer back through the mists of time to see what was happening on this day in history. On this day in 1620, the Mayflower set sail from Southampton to the New World. Apparently, there was a time when you could leave your country of origin in search of a new life elsewhere. Suella Braverman, take note. In 1939, The Wizard of Oz premiered in the US. In 1969, the Woodstock Festival opened in New York. In 1971, Jackie Stewart became the Formula One world champion. In 1979, Apocalypse Now, fantastic movie, was released. In 1998, the Omar bombing in Northern Ireland killed 29 people and injured a further 220. And on this day in 2017, Daniel Craig confirmed that he would play James Bond just one more time. And what a time it was. If anyone's seen the final Daniel Craig James Bond movie, I think you'll agree. Very, very good indeed. Now, before we get into the real meat of the show, let me remind you of the question of the day, which comes to us courtesy of our friend Gary Muirhead. Yes, Gary Muirhead is fast becoming our resident quizmaster. His question of the day is, what is the first thing you do each morning without fail? Now, I know we have a number of men, of a certain age among us, myself included. So let me save you the trouble. I know we all get up for a pee, but what else? Personally, the first thing I do, and I'm embarrassed to say it, my first thing I do is reach my phone. I used to do it to check to make sure there were no emergency messages from my parents, but now I just check this show's WhatsApp group and my email messages. What about you? What is your morning ritual? Let us know in the chat. Let's get the show on the road, shall we? And we begin with the tragic news that a worker has been killed during the construction of the new Everton football stadium at Bramley Moor Dock. Work has been suspended on the £500 million project by main contractor Lang O'Rourke until further notice. The 26-year-old victim is understood to have suffered severe head injuries and was treated at the scene but declared dead at Aintree Hospital a short time later. A spokesperson for Lang O'Rourke said, "We can confirm that earlier today a member of our team who was carrying out work for one of our subcontractors was seriously injured in an incident. He was taken to a hospital via ambulance where he sadly died. We are shocked and saddened by today's tragic event, and our thoughts are with the family and friends of the deceased man and our wider project team. The police and health and safety executive are on site and we have suspended work until further notice. We will cooperate fully with any investigation that follows." Obviously, we will bring you more news and details on that as we receive them. As I say, I'm not going to say thoughts and prayers with the family. It's meaningless, absolutely meaningless. But let's hope there is a sensible resolution in the wake of such a tragic incident. Let's have one of these. Actually, yeah, let's have one of them. Throw over to the chat. We'll come back to the question of the day a bit later on. Jim Turner says, "I don't know what trade the lad was or how he got killed, but from a group works housing site point of view, I think we should work in a segregated area as other trades just don't seem to see the dangers of plant moving around. I know our industry is all about putting signs and walkways everywhere, but it's pointless if folks don't use them." All a good point. Segregation, I do think, is a very, very important point. But I think there's another one here, and I'm not suggesting there is any complicity here for Lang O'Rourke or anybody else involved in the project. Too early to speculate. But how many incidents, accidents, and ultimately fatalities are caused by us trying to do a month's work in a week? How many are caused by poor planning and a lack of segregation, as Jim Turner suggests there? Peter McKenna has just said, according to one news report, he was something to do with heavy machinery. Yeah, doesn't look good at all. And Al Grierson morning out says, "Tragic event, condolences to the family." Yeah, indeed. Right, okay. So let's get back to the job in hand, shall we? How would you remove a 4,000-ton bridge over the M42 motorway in a single weekend? Well, the long answer is that you spend months in planning, assessing the project from every conceivable angle. You spend sleepless nights figuring out how to deliver the project safely while ensuring the road below will reopen on time. You then assemble a team of 20 demolition experts, 8 50-ton excavators and a pair of 40-tonners, together with 6 ADTs to haul away the rubble to a local stockpile. That is the long answer. The short answer is you call Armac Demolition. And that, my friends, is why Armac are known as the Bridge Busters. Absolutely world-class work there by the Armac team and our mate Gavin Nelson, trainer to the nobility. Morning. I don't know where that came from. Good morning, Gavin. Says they really are something else. Yes, absolutely. And Al Grierson says very fast and clean job. That's what you get when you employ the fine folks over at Armac, one of the industry's finest. Now, I'll tell you what, I'm about to show you a new film from the fine folks at Volvo. But before I do, check this out. It's a very stylish film that Volvo have produced on their new EC220D. Take a look. Yeah, that's one of a number of semi-animated films that are now available to watch over on the Volvo Construction Equipment YouTube channel. Works as a nice little lead into our next story as well. But go and take a look. They are very cool. Now, speaking of Volvo, as we obviously were, as you know, I will not be here on Friday. Instead, I will be in Germany with the Volvo team. I'm going to check out the latest round of the World Rallycross Championships in which a Volvo car, an electric Volvo car nonetheless, is competing. I'm also going to see some new Volvo machines. But most of all, I'm going for some peace and quiet. The sort of peace and quiet that only electric machines and electric race cars can provide.
We are made to listen for sounds. We instantly and unconsciously connect sounds with emotions. Pleasure. Joy. Annoyance. Fear. Throughout history, our survival has depended on our ability to hear sounds. Then came noise. And survival took on a different meaning, because we don't need noise to survive. In fact, we need less of it. Noise is a health hazard. At Volvo Construction Equipment, we are committed to building the world we want to live in. And in our world, there is less noise. We know we can't completely get rid of it, but we can try. That's why we now launch our new compact electric construction machines. They are here to add silence.
Yeah, despite the fact it means I'll be working a weekend, really looking forward to this trip. I'll be bringing you the best of it next week. But don't forget, there is no show on Friday because I won't be here. Let's have a look. Mick Norton, good morning, Mick. The sad loss of yet another construction worker, and we hear the usual news that the HSE are investigating. Statistically, there will be no closure for the bereaved for another 3 years at least. Here. When will the industry's so-called leaders, Build UK, Construction Leadership Council, etc., start demanding the government give the HSE the tools to do the job, or alternatively openly declare that the HSE are not value for money for the taxpayer and are unable to ensure the safety of? And that's where the message runs out. If you'd like to see the rest of that, head on over to LinkedIn where Mick has just posted that. It's a very good point, and unfortunately that. I think that's one of the things that I find most frustrating, not just about the latest fatality, but about all fatalities, is because there is now there is now a routine. It is not accepted, certainly not by me. Accident happens, we all clutch our chests and how tragic. And then the news headlines move on, and then sometimes 3 or 4 years down the line, the health and safety executive will issue their findings. Somebody will be prosecuted, and we'll all get on with our lives. And yet, in the meantime, in the 3 to 4 years that that investigation has taken place, another 120 odd people, possibly even more, will have perished on UK construction and demolition sites. Just not good enough. I'm going to say good morning to Ben Hanratty. Good morning, Ben. I don't remember seeing you here before. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm going to give you some welcome confetti, because that's what we do when we have a newcomer. Where are you're watching from, Ben. But either way, thank you for joining us. Just one very quick thing before I do move on with the show. I actually posted links to the news yesterday, the BBC news about the death on the Lang O'Rourke site up at the Everton Stadium at Bramley-Moore Dock, and was criticised for it. And I realised death and fatalities and that kind of thing are a very emotive subject. But somebody was telling me I was too soon. The point I was trying to make is I actually report the news. I know I talk about demolition and construction. I'm not part of the industry. The business I'm in is news. And I realise that sometimes doesn't sit particularly well with people, but that's just the way it is, I'm afraid. Ben Hanratty is over in Northern Ireland, fantastic part of the world. One of these days I will do it a proper visit rather than popping in and out. Ken Hatcher, Gary Muirhead, the days are coming to an end. The days are coming to an end? I hope that's not the case. Okay, I can see what that relates to. I was talking about the sound of silence with Volvo, and Gary Muirhead says, you still can't beat the sound of a V8 Scania engine. There is a time and a place. I think if I'm on site, the sound of a V8 Scania engine, absolutely fine. If I'm fishing, please, as quiet as possible. Thank you. Now, I think we need one of these.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Embodied carbon. We all need to get used to it because it's an issue that apparently is not going away anytime soon. We recently reported that Community Secretary Michael Gove had blocked the demolition of the flagship Marks & Spencer store on London's Oxford Street. Well, anyone that thought that was a one-off, that it was a London thing, or that it was merely Michael Gove flexing his muscles, now needs to think again. The latest building to attract the ire of architects, academics and activists is the Aberdeen headquarters of oil giant Shell. The 5-storey building has been Shell's home since 1973, but the company has recently moved and planned to demolish the modernist structure. Shell notified Aberdeen City Council of its plans in mid-July, but now an open letter has been signed by more than 40 local architects, academics and climate activists, each raising concerns about the carbon emissions associated with destroying rather than reusing the building. The environmental impact assessment conducted by Shell fails to measure or consider the carbon emissions relating to the demolition in any way, reads the letter. Yet the emissions involved in processing, recycling and transporting all the elements of the demolished building will be vast, especially given the huge amount of concrete in the existing structure. The letter's signatories have called for the planning application to be delayed or rejected until further information is made available, including the assessment that determined redevelopment was unfeasible. They have demanded that Shell carry out another environmental impact assessment as well as a life cycle assessment of all available options for the site, and they have said the public should be invited to submit design and reuse suggestions. I recorded that yesterday, as you can probably tell. That explains the sudden change of T-shirt colour. But this is really getting very serious now. It seems that if anyone objects to a demolition of any kind, all they need to do is say the words embodied carbon, and architects, academics and climate activists will flock to their support. As Gary Muirhead has just said, the Shell building in Aberdeen is an eyesore. It was built in the 1970s. All buildings... Okay, I may be overstating things slightly. All buildings built in the 1970s were a bloody eyesore, almost without exception. I'm going to do more on this after the show, but I do want to throw this up. Mick Norton, thank you very much indeed, Mick. In 2003, the Health and Safety Executive had 4,200 staff, which is now nearly halved to 2,400 in 2023. The HSE's funding is currently 43% below what it was in 2010. I understand all of that. I am the first. I'm always the first to criticise the Health and Safety Executive. I don't think they do a good job at all. I think the Listen, I've said all that I need to say about the fact that they are now 7.5 years in to their DidCot investigation. I'm aware of all of that. But at the same time, I will say this. This is an accident at the Everton football stadium. It is not the fault of the health and safety executive. The health and safety executive will probably be at fault from today onwards. They would take too long. The whole thing will be protracted, and so on down the line. But I think this is akin to blaming the police for a rise in crime. The police are not to blame for a rise in crime. Yes, we could have more bobbies on the beat, much the same as we could have more health and safety executive officers out there visiting sites. But ultimately, it is the industry, and in the case of the police, society, that needs to change. And when the industry sits down at the end of this year, when the statistics come out about site fatalities at the end of the year, which they always do, and they're at 40 plus, which they generally are, and we all sit there and bemoan how tragic it all is. When will we start to do the joined up thinking of not trying to condense 1 month projects into a week, of constantly badgering and bullying subcontractors into completing their work faster and cheaper and getting out of the way so that another trade can come in? And as somebody said earlier, I think it was Jim Turner said earlier, when are we going to stop trying to get everything done at once? Why don't we get the demolition done? Get the demolition out of the way, get the piling contractor in, get the piling contractors out of the way, and then get the steel erectors in, and then do it as a progressive, not an all at once. It really is starting to, as you can probably gather, get my goat. Now, there is no gripe of the day today. Don't get me wrong, I'm still sieving over a whole bunch of very inconsequential things, but by way of the change, I thought I'd share something with you instead. You already know that our question of the day relates to what we do in the morning. For most of us, if not all of us, the first thing in the morning generally means we head off to work. But imagine if you didn't have to. Imagine if your machine could do the work for you. And imagine if you had at your disposal autopilot. Well, it's closer than you think.
We always set ourselves extremely high standards for the precision and quality of our paving results, whether regarding durability, visual reasons, or as in this case, safety. Here on the A43 near Münster, we are slip-forming a concrete safety barrier with our SP25. In this project, we again rely on stringless technology. We have been using the autopilot system since it became available in the market. We're running it on both our machines whenever it is possible, as the time savings are tremendous.
I'm particularly impressed by the intuitive handling and control measurement functions. Normally when running stringless, you cannot check the positioning once the concrete has been poured, as there's no visual reference available. But thanks to the Field Rover, I can perform a control measurement right behind the machine. Additionally, I really like that everything comes from a single supplier: the machine, the autopilot system, and the technical support.
Autopilot makes the whole process much easier. We don't need to set up or break down a string line, and that lets us move around on the site without any obstacles. With the Field Rover, we're able to survey the site ourselves, even though we're not surveyors, and that saves us loads of time.
Totally agree, Al. They really are an impressive piece of kit. Those specialist concrete forming machines, yeah, slip form pavers, absolutely fantastic. I'm going to say goodbye to Gavin Elson, who is heading back off. Got his priorities right. His candidate is back from break. Have a great day. You too as well. Jim Turner says, tune, yes, Wirtgen provided the music for that. Nothing to do with me whatsoever, so I can't claim responsibility. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. The daily gripe therapy session will return, of course, because I've always got something to bitch and whine about. But I'd love to hear yours. What is it that grinds your gears, gets your goat, and generally butters your parsnips? Right, that pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into the chat to see what you're all saying today. If you can't stick around for that, then please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Have a good day. But if you have the time and the inclination, please stick around. The Craic will begin right after this final word from our key show sponsor. I'm just in the process of going live over on Instagram, which is what we do most mornings these days. Good morning, Instagram. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm actually broadcasting over on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at the moment. If you'd like to come and see that, you can, but please feel free to join us here. Let's have a look. I'll tell you what, let me get some music playing in the background. Those on Instagram won't be able to hear it, obviously, because Instagram. There we go. There's some background music. I am going to go through the chat, but I want to throw this one up from Gary Muirhead. What cost a life? That is probably the most relevant question of the day. We don't have any details. We don't know the name of the individual that was killed at the Everton Stadium yesterday, but we do know he was male and that he was 26 years old. So 26 years old. What was I doing when I was 26 years old? Not long married, and I had my first child at 26. So there is probably every possibility that this is a young guy with a young family, young wife, fiance, girlfriend, whatever it might be. So there is a possibility that somebody in their 20s has now been widowed. There is a possibility that there is a child out there that no longer has a father. There is almost certainly a mother and a father out there that no longer have a son. There's going to be potentially brothers and sisters and cousins and aunts and uncles who have lost somebody very close and very dear to them. There's going to be a whole bunch of friends. If you're 26 years old, I know what I was like at 26 years old. Very, very sociable indeed. It wore off, but very sociable indeed at 26 years old. And there is now a whole raft of people that have lost somebody very, very close to them. And make no bones about it, whatever the health and safety executive say at the end of their investigation, the reason that person is no longer with us is plain and simply because demolition and construction, in this case construction, is hazardous, it's dangerous, and in this instance it's deadly. How are we still letting this happen? How are we still sending workers into an environment that we know to be potentially hazardous? Why are we not looking at projects and saying absolutely not? I'm not taking part in this. There's no way I'm putting myself or my team in this situation. Absolutely not. And yet, because of the desire for cash and the need for turnover and so on down the line, increasingly, and we should say good morning to Ben Hanratty, who is actually leaving us, going back to work in Northern Ireland, I guess. There is a whole litany of reasons why we continue to put ourselves in harm's way. It needs to stop. And despite what I said about the fact that the health and safety executive don't cause problems, they don't cause accidents, they don't cause incidents, and they don't cause fatalities, I think if they had larger teeth, I think if they acted more quickly, then maybe we could start to stamp some of these incidents and accidents out. But for the time being, that's not the case. And in answer to your question, Gary, there is no sum that you could put on it. Should the family receive compensation of $1 million, 10 million, 100 million? You know, we're talking about a project here that's £500 million. £500 million is the financial cost, but it's cost a young man his life. There is no way you can put a price on that. I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and I used to work on the news desk of Contract Journal back in the day. And I kind of thought that by now I would have grown a skin thick enough not to laugh off site fatalities, but for them not to bother me too much. It hasn't happened. If anything, I find each new site fatality more frustrating, more annoying, and more tragic than the last. Because we have so many, you think about the legal framework of the UK, the US, any other country, everything works on precedent. If you want to argue a legal case, you look at what's happened before. And the same applies in health and safety. You look at what's happened before. Surely by now, having killed literally tens of thousands of men and women around the world, surely by now we have enough precedent to look at and say, we are not going to do this job in this way anymore. The time has come for us to change, to upgrade our systems, and to not try to condense projects into shorter periods, to not try to cut corners, to not insist upon the lowest possible price. I just find it so endlessly frustrating. Puts me in one of those moods where I really dearly want to go and walk out in the street and punch the first person that I see. That's one of the things that I do actively. I'm going to come back to the question of the day in the morning in just a moment. One of the first things I do is promise myself that I won't punch anyone. Dan Cullen, good morning, Dan. You were first off the mark this morning. Hope you're fit and well, my friend. Mick Norton was second in line. Morning, Mick. Thank you very much indeed for being here. I didn't get around to reading your article yesterday, but I'm going to do so after the show. I went from this to writing an article, and then the day was done. But I will get to it this afternoon. Gary Muirhead, thank you for the question of the day, Gary. And I'll come back to that in just a second. But the question of the day was, what is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Obviously, I think men of a certain age head to the loo. You can leave that one out. But what else is it that you do? But thanks again, Gary, and good morning to you, sir. Peter McKenna, our resident sick note, is here, but he's not sick note at the moment. He's back at work, which I'm pleased to see. Jim Turner is in the house. Morning, Jim. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Chris Ford is in the house saying, what is Chris Ford saying? Good morning, people. Hope we're all fit and well. I can only speak for myself because I've not had a health report from everybody else, but feeling in fine fettle today. Yeah, not too bad at all. All fit, never well, says Peter McKenna. Hence the reason he will be forever known in these circles as Sick Note. Let's have a look. Morning all, says Mark Whiting. Morning, Mark. Hope you're doing well today, my friend. There we are. Question of the day. What is the first thing you do each morning? Now, I realise it goes against the advice of those that know better than I, but I sleep with my phone fairly close to my bed. Have done since I've got a mobile phone, basically. There's a charger by the side of the bed. That's what it does overnight. But I did get into the habit over the last couple of years of keeping it even closer to my ear than I had done previously, just in case there was some form of emergency from my parents. Obviously, they are no longer with us, so I don't have that to worry about. But the phone has remained very, very close to my ear. And now I'm just forever checking it. Check the WhatsApp group, check the emails, check the stats on Instagram and YouTube. That's the first thing I do each morning. How sad a life is that? I'd love to say that I got up and drank a good healthy glass of water, or that I popped off 50 push-ups or something. No, I check my mobile phone, and I'm fairly sure I'm probably not alone. There is Peter McKenna. Shame, just another soul lost on a UK construction site. And unfortunately, it happens with such regularity, I could actually save that as a screenshot, and I'll be playing it again in a week or two's time. It happens with that much regularity. Ken Hatcher is in the house. Morning, Ken. Hope you're well. He's got a mixed bag of weather today. First thing he does in the morning is get out of bed. I mean, obviously, yeah, you get out. But in actual fact, I read my mobile phone before I've got out of bed, which sets a bad example, and I do apologise for that. Graham Footy Williams says, set an alarm, wait to go in and sign on. Good morning. Good morning to you as well. Al Grierson says, good morning, Mark. Good morning, gang. Good morning to you, Al, all the way from sunny, hopefully, Luxembourg. There is Chris Ford. Question of the day, wake up and I have to go. Yes, I think that's going to be common among most of us, actually. Al Grierson. Aside from the obvious, I make tea before I step into the shower. So, shall I tell you my actual morning routine? So, I wake up, alarm wakes me up, if the dogs haven't. I wake up, check my phone, downstairs, make coffee for myself and my wife, take hers back to bed, bring mine to the office. At this point, I'm usually still in a dressing gown. And I sit here and I pull together the day's show, and then I go back upstairs with another cup of coffee for my wife. I jump in the shower, make myself look beautiful. It's not working. And then I come down and put the finishing touches to the show, and then I press the go live button. That's my morning routine in its entirety. Coffee 3. It's necessary sometimes. I'm going to go back to this from Jim Turner. It says, I don't know what trade the lad was or how he got killed, but from I think that's groundworks housing site point of view, I think we should work in a segregated area, as other trades just don't seem to see the dangers of plant moving around. I know our industry is all about putting signs and walkways everywhere, but it's pointless if folks don't use them. Totally agree with that. And when you think about it, and I'm going to use demolition as an example here. In many ways, the way in which we work goes against just about everything that we believe in the field of demolition. If you were to say to a demolition expert, somebody like a Mike Keogh up at C&D Consultancy, morning Mike, John Woodward, also up at C&D, Matthew Bargett at C&D, ask any demolition expert, what is the best possible way to avoid accidents, incidents and fatalities? And they will tell you, just basically seal the site, don't have anybody walking around, let the machines do their work, keep men away from machines, keep women away from machines, have no pedestrians and everything else. Just secure the site so that demolition people can do the demolition in the way that demolition is supposed to be done. However, if you're working for a client and you're not working on something like the M42 ridge removal that Armac did, the chances are you're not allowed to secure the site, because you'll have another trade working over here and another trade working over here. Every possibility there could be a trade working under you as we speak. How on earth does that make any sense? Why aren't demolition contractors, and there is no suggestion that this fatality at Everton is any way demolition related. I think we're way beyond the point of demolition there. But how is it that we as an industry just say, well, we prefer to work completely in isolation, but just on this one time, yes, we'll happily demolish a building while there's a piling contractor working below? Surely the answer should be no. Just no, absolutely not, because we don't want to kill anyone, and if we do kill somebody, why should that be on my conscience? Why should one of my directors face corporate manslaughter charges when it is your insistence that we work completely at odds with how we're supposed to work? Al Grierson says, tragic event, condolences to the family. Yeah, as I say, I mean, of course I feel sad for the family, but what is the point? What is the point of offering condolences? If I did it every time, we'd be doing it daily. And does it mean anything? You know, is anybody in the family looking at this and thinking, oh, that's better, I feel so much better now? Of course they're not. And the whole thing, because we see it so often, the whole thing has become trite and predictable. And it just blows my mind. It really does. Question of the day. First thing I do in the morning is take the dog for a walk. Very admirable. I'd like to do that, but my dogs are of a certain age and they don't want to get out of bed. And in the instance of the smaller of our two boxer dogs, when they don't want to get out of bed, that means they don't want to get out of my bed. They are right there, literally laying a pillow beside me. That's how I woke up this morning. Yeah. According to one news report, it was something to do with heavy machinery. Yeah, again, I've been through all the reports I could find this morning. Obviously, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, but then also over onto Construction Inquirer, Construction Index, Building Magazine. I've been through all of them. I couldn't see any reference to exactly what had caused it, and I'm certainly not going to speculate. If it is heavy equipment, obviously that's going to be very closely related to what a lot of us are involved in, so even more tragic. But I'll keep you posted as we find out more. Gavin Elson, who is no longer with us. That sounds awful. He's been and he's gone. He's gone back to training. But good morning, Gavin, belatedly. I asked the question, how would you bring down a 4,000-ton bridge? Al Grierson said, explosion. You could do that. Bit of a mess to clear up, and bearing in mind there are penalty fees if you don't get that road open on time. I think the control of Armac is both admirable and advisable. I'll never mind sensible answers only. Yeah, sensible answers only. If you want to take down a power station, phone Brown and Mason. If you want to take down a bridge, phone Armac. Really is pretty much that simple. Let's have a look. Ken Hatcher says that's an impressive job. Now, I've got a message over on Instagram from my mate Martin of the Norwegian Earth Mover. Good morning, Mark. Here in Norway, many companies now have to do... let's have a look. Now have to do an SJA, safety job analysis, before a project can start. If every person also... do that before they work. I agree. I was actually contacted yesterday afternoon as a result of my reporting on this. Somebody has developed an app that allows you to analyse a site from a safety perspective. It's safety hazards and risks and that kind of thing. And Martin's just gone on to say they have more focus on the job and can see potential danger on the site. Yeah, when was the last time you actually saw that? When you guys are all out on site, when was the last time you saw that? I'm not talking about a toolbox talk once the job has started, but when was the last time you saw a set of RAMs, risk assessment method statements, where you thought, actually, this has been developed entirely from a safety standpoint and not from a let's get the job done as quickly and cheaply as possible standpoint? Be interested to know. Dan Cullen says, just lost my head this morning as an idiot walked between two lorries I was loading while I was open bucket. Not entirely sure what that means. That really is the point, isn't it? All of the training that we talk about, the health and safety executive, all of these competence cards, and somebody has walked between two lorries while they're being loaded. And the first person to complain if something had gone wrong would be the person that got hit on the head by rubble or earth or whatever it might be. How are these people still making it through the training system? I honestly don't know. Gavin Elson, they really are something else. Listen, I'm not on the payroll. But if somebody asked me about the biggest demolition contractors in the country, I would quickly rattle off Erith and Keltbray and McGee's and so on down the line. If somebody asked me about the best demolition contractors in the country, the first two that come to mind would be AR Demolition and Armac. Armac do things right. They really, really do. If ever you get a chance to actually see one of their sites, or better still, go back and have a look at our film of their work at Wembley Stadium, maybe 3 years ago now. Just an astonishing way that they work. Very fast and clean job. That's what they're all about. Just to give you a bit of insight on that, I was on a job with them on the M23. Is it the M23? I was on a job with them a while back, and I think they had something like 8 excavators that were working on a bridge removal, but they also had another 6 parked up 100 yards away, just in case one of the frontline machines went down. They had spare attachments. They were literally ready to go. And probably the thing that stuck out the most was there was a Pertec van on standby. This wasn't the job I was on was down near Southampton, but this wasn't a Pertec Southampton van providing hydraulic hoses. This was from Pertec Birmingham, because the Armac approach is that the guy from Pertec Birmingham dealt with their machines all the time, because they're based up in Solihull or thereabouts. Dealt with their machines all the time, knew their machines inside out, knew exactly what hoses went where, and was on standby. So they actually brought in Pertec Birmingham to stand by, and they did literally stand by. Don't think they actually did anything at all, but they were standing by for 48 hours, more like 36 hours actually, while a bridge was demolished over the motorway. That is the Armac attention to detail. Absolutely astonishing. Let me just kill that, because somebody's trying to phone me in the middle of a live show. People, do you not know what I do for a living? Glenn Johnston is in the house. Morning, Glenn. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's have a look. Mick Norton says, sad loss of yet another construction sector worker. And we hear the usual news that the HSE are investigating. Statistically, there will be no closure for the bereaved for another 3 years at least. Yeah, absolutely. I've said this before, and I shall say it again. In the immediate aftermath of the Didcot accident back in February 2016, I was interviewed by Sky News, and it just so happened I had this information to hand. The HSE had already said that it was now taking an average of 3 years to investigate and prosecute a site fatality. That was back in 2016. The HSE is considerably smaller and significantly less well funded today, so I think 3 years could well be optimistic. When will let me try that with my teeth in. When will the industry's so-called leaders, Build UK, Construction Leadership Council, start demanding government give the HSE the tools to do the job, or alternatively openly declare that the HSE are not value for money for the taxpayer and are unable to ensure the safety of the industry? And bearing in mind the Health and Safety Executive, I realise we take them in the context of construction and demolition, but the Health and Safety Executive cover industry as a whole. You know, there are other industries out there that are every bit as hazardous as construction and demolition, like farming, like mining, like quarrying, and so on down the line, plus all the manufacturing industries and such. Are they all bitching and moaning at the moment? I'd like to think they are. Maybe the time has come for us all to get our heads together and actually start beating on the door of number 10 Downing Street. Tell Rishi Sunak to stop concentrating on people fleeing bloody war-torn countries in little boats and actually sort out the problems here at home. I was praising the sound of silence, but Gary Muirhead still likes the sound of a V8 Scania engine. Each to their own, Gary, each to their own. Ben Hanratty over from Northern Ireland. He's been and gone, but good morning, Ben, anyway. The days of loud V8s is coming to an end. It most certainly is. And here is the point. I realise demolition contractors don't maraud across the countryside and just demolish the first thing they see. They're always invited to do it. They don't decide what is demolished. So this Shell building, okay, so Shell built it, custom built it back in the early 1970s. Off the top of my head, I think it was about 1973, and they've been in there ever since. It's 5 stories, ugly, as Gary Muirhead has said, it's an eyesore. Now, Shell, in their infinite wisdom, have decided that it is no longer fit for their purposes, and therefore they have moved to another office. So, first and foremost, if it's not suitable for Shell, is it suitable for somebody else? There's a question mark. Bearing in mind, back in the early 1970s, did we have the building regs at that time? If we did, they were probably pretty fresh. They would have changed multiple times over that time. Were we worried about things like thermal efficiency and that kind of thing? Is it thermally efficient? And most certainly, a building that was erected in the 1970s would not have made any allowance whatsoever for things like air conditioning. which we now see as a requirement because of global warming, and it certainly wouldn't have ducting for the cables and what have you to allow internet connectivity. So we've got a building that is both ugly and is no longer fit for purpose, and yet we have architects, academics and activists that are now crawling all over it, shouting embodied carbon in the hope that somebody may preserve it. To what end? To what end? What are you going to do with a 5-story building that is unfit for purpose? And one of the things that struck me as the most bizarre of all of this, bearing in mind the business that Shell is in. They're in the oil and gas business. They have been they've been drilling in the North Sea for decades. What is the environmental impact of what they're actually doing, and then what is the environmental impact of what they then produce? Because they are producing oil and gas for factories that are belching plumes of smoke into the air. They are producing petrol and diesel that are belching smoke into the atmosphere, and yet we're getting uptight about a 1970s building and a bit of embodied carbon. Get a grip, people, for the love of God. They would rather put an ugly new monstrosity there than redevelop existing buildings. In some cases, yeah, I would certainly agree with that. But what if as Gary Muirhead has said, the existing building is that ugly monstrosity? Get rid. What? Even setting aside the environmental thing, and I realise we can't do that, but even setting aside the environmental thing, there are bits. You go to bits of the world. I'm quite fortunate in having the opportunity to travel quite a bit. I'm just back from Sorrento in Italy. It's lovely. The Amalfi Coast stretches before you. The food is fantastic. The scenery is fantastic. The people are lovely. But Sorrento really, really, really needs to be upgraded. There's a lot of it that looks like it's falling down. It could all do with a lick of paint. If we are going down this road of embodied carbon and let's preserve absolutely everything, imagine how the centre of London will look in 20 years' time. Imagine how the centre of Birmingham and Manchester and Leeds and Glasgow and Newcastle will look. Do we really want 1980s built buildings for the 2050s? Do we? I have no answer to that question from Gary Muirhead. What cost a life? Listen, I'm at the point of desperation with this now. It seems like the health and safety executive are not going to sort things out anytime soon, and it seems the industry is not going to sort things out anytime soon. So how about we levy a minimum fine? If somebody dies on your site and you are found culpable, 10 million quid. That's your starting point. 10 million quid. And upwards of 10 million quid, it's completely linked to your turnover. So baseline is 10 million quid. So you either have to pay an absolute bloody fortune for lots and lots of very, very expensive insurance, or you sort your bloody world out and stop killing people. Baseline, 10 million quid. 50 million. Really, really make it hurt. We're fining companies £17 million for collusion. How do the two tally? They don't. It's a good point from Jim Turner. Folks probably thought Tudor-style buildings were an eyesore at some point in history, but now they're part of the fabric of our architectural history and timeline. It's a good point, I agree, but by the same token, I grew up in a 1960s built tower block in South London. There is no way on God's earth that at some point in the next 10, 15, 100 years, somebody will point at Drury House in Battersea and say, what a fine specimen of late 60s architecture. Anyone with any sense will say it's a social experiment gone wrong. It must be an awful place to live. Tear the bugger down and replace it with something actually habitable. That's the truth of the matter. Al Grierson says, really impressive bit of kit. Those specialist concrete forming machines. Yeah, I actually did the PR for a while for Gameco, who are obviously in that business. And yes, they are very, very impressive. There is Gavin Nelson leaving us. There is Ben Hanratty leaving us. Jim Turner is enjoying the music. Nigel Williams is in the house late, but I made it. Yeah, you missed all the fun and games. I've been talking a lot about site fatalities, I'm afraid, Nigel, because as you're probably aware, there was another one yesterday. Dan Cullen, what pisses me off is you do a toolbox talk and yet they don't listen, as majority don't understand. Really cheeses me off, as I had a close call already. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying this one, it's too soon. It's too soon to be talking about this one. But look at how we've gone with cigarette packaging. Back when I was a kid, both my parents smoked. When I first met her, my wife smoked. So I've been surrounded by smokers. I've never smoked myself, but I've been surrounded by smokers. And there used to be a warning on cigarette packaging, something along the lines of smoking can be harmful to health. And that's got more and more graphic and more obvious and in your face as we've gone along over the years, to the point where in certain parts of the world it's not unusual to see on the packaging for cigarettes photographs of diseased lungs. Come back to that in a second. I'm just going to say goodbye to Nigel. Thank you very much indeed for being here, Nigel. Nigel? Let me try that again. Let me try it again. Our friend Martin, Norwegian Earth Mover. I'm talking to Nigel Williams, and I'm thinking about Nigel over here. Martin, go and have a fantastic day up in Norway. I'll see you again, my friend. So yes, we've got to the point now where some parts of the world, we have photographs of diseased lungs and cigarette packaging. So, Toolbox Talk. Show them a photograph of somebody that's been killed on site. Really wakes the fuckers up in the morning. Excuse my French. But really wake people up in the morning. Not namby-pamby, let's be careful out there, let's look after each other. Actually show them the outcome of a loss of concentration or a stupid act. Nigel Williams, question of the day, pour freshly brewed coffee. That's not a bad way to start the day. Are some construction workers really that stupid? Yeah, they are. And I realise, again, I'll go back to the health and safety executive. They are not to blame for accidents. They are to blame for the protracted nature in which they are investigated, but they're not to blame for the accidents themselves. The people that are to blame are the industry itself. So either employ people that are more sensible, or improve your training to the point where even people that are a bit daft are fully aware of the potential impact of their actions. Question of the day, up at 3:30, check groups and breakfast. 3:30? Good God, man. Is there two of those in a single day? 2 3:30s? Surely not. Question of the day, get the kettle on and mash some tea. I need at least a couple of pints before leaving the house. Mash some tea. There's a man drinking proper tea. I'm just going to say a very good morning to the team over in Germany, over Hagedorn, one of my very favourite demolition companies. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you guys here. Don't remember seeing you before, so I'm going to give you your, when I can find it, your welcome confetti. Really pleased to see you guys here. They do some fantastic work. If you get a moment, obviously they're watching over on YouTube, go and have a look at the Hagedorn YouTube channel. Oh, they've got some fantastic equipment, some fantastic videos as well. Let's have a look. Nigel Williams says, the problem with construction is that some people seem to think that nodding and signing a piece of paper is enough without fully understanding the operation and the dangers associated with the task in hand. Why? That's anyone's guess. It's a very good point. And I do wonder... where... I'm also going to say good morning to vacamet.be over on Instagram, who are watching from Belgium. Good morning. From Belgium. The Germans are in the house and the Belgians are in the house. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate that. Yeah, and bearing in mind, somebody mentioned toolbox talks and what have you, and pre-start briefings and all that kind of thing. Is there a thought that maybe we're doing them with such a regularity now that they have ceased to actually carry any meaning? I realise it's a weird analogy to draw, but back in the day when I was at primary school, about 1,000 years ago, we were expected to recite the Lord's Prayer before the start of each day. We'd sit down cross-legged on the floor, straight backs, and cross-legged, and we would recite the Lord's Prayer. It comes to a point in the end where you're saying the words without actually hearing the words. Are we doing the same with toolbox talks? Are we doing the same with pre-start briefings? Are we inundating our workers with such a degree of information that they're just now completely tuned out? I do wonder. Power Up, point of work risk assessment. Take 5 books where we discuss the task and sign on. Proper supervision is safe supervision. And again, that throws up another question. Obviously, we've spoken about the health and safety executive. We've talked about the people that we're employing, but ultimately the responsibility for the safety of people on site is very much in the lap of the supervisors. Are we handing out supervisor cards willy-nilly? Are we handing them out to people that really, really deserve them? If anybody's got any answers, I'd love to know. I was at SAS 13 when Armac demolished the old Victorian era bridge to make way for HS2. What a joy to watch them work. Can't argue with a single word of that. What a joy indeed. The very best of the very best. Simple as. It's like demolition art. It really is that good. Peter McKenna, I didn't realise that Peter had left, but he's back apparently. I thought the HSE had appointed a new top dog. Has he not decided to do something about the state of the business yet? Or is it just another corporate shit show? My guess is the latter. But again, I'll come back to the point that I made earlier. For us to make any real change, for us to make any real improvement to the genuine health and safety of those working within the UK demolition and construction industry, it needs to come from the industry itself. We can't rely upon being policed as the standard that we set. We need to set that standard whether somebody's looking or not. I'll go back to points that I've made in the past about the National Federation of Demolition Contractors and their site audit scheme. At heart, it's a great idea to have your sites independently audited by a third party that is completely isolated from your company. Come along, make sure that you're doing things that you're supposed to be doing. But all of that is rendered meaningless when you get to handpick the site. You get to handpick the site, the date that they get to see it. You should be operating at a level that should be open to visit and criticism and assessment and audit all the time. And again, I'll go back to, I've already mentioned once and I'll mention them again. I regularly have the need to go and shoot photographs and video on site. And despite the fact that they're up in the Midlands and I'm not, there are 2 that I call upon first of all. The first 2 are Armac and AR Demolition. Not just because they're helpful, but because they will basically say, look, here's a list of our sites. Pick one that you like the look of, go and shoot it. They are that confident that what is going on their site is 100% okay, that they're willing to allow me, and we all know what I do, I can go there with a video camera and a stills camera, and they will allow me in without any hesitation. And I'll throw another name in there. Downward Demolition do exactly the same, and they're a bit more local to me. That is the standard that you should be setting. Not, we're operating on 12 sites, but if we're going to have a site audit or we're going to have a health and safety executive visit, ideally it should be on that one, on that day, at that time, because we know it's all spick and span. It should be spick and span on every site, every single minute of the day. When they make me king of construction, it's unlikely, but when they do, I promise, you have my word, I will sort all this out. That's going to do us. We're at an hour and 7 minutes of this. I realise that over on Instagram it's been a lot shorter because you just joined us for the chat. I'm going to tell Instagram very quickly. We broadcast a live show over on Facebook, YouTube, and on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well, 10 a.m. every morning. If you would like to be part of the show and see all of the stuff that we've been talking about, please join us for that. But in the meantime, I'm going to sign off from Instagram, and I'm going to go back to our proper chat over on the main show here, where I can see a point from Chris Ford. A supervisor can only be in one place at a time. Was the method statement being followed? Somewhere along the line, a bad decision has been made, either by impulse or lack of thought, and unfortunately, someone has paid the price. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. How do we, as an industry, then go about making sure, you know, if we can't have every employee with their own dedicated supervisor, which would be lunacy, how do we go about doing that? How do we go about ensuring that every single worker is taking personal responsibility, not just for their own safety, but for the safety of those working alongside, above and below them? How do we do that? I think we're at the point, surely we're now at the point where we can all see that little bits of plastic in a wallet are not proof of competence. I think we can all see now that touchscreen tests are not proof of competence. I think we can now see, despite the best efforts from Gavin Elson and people like him, that even the very best training in the world does not guarantee competence, does not guarantee safety. So what do we do? We'll come back to that tomorrow, I think, because an hour and 10 minutes is more than enough of anyone's time. Everybody, please try and have a good day. Enjoy the sunshine if you've got some. I realise I say this every day, but just today, just do me one small favour, will you? Look after yourself. Look after your family, your friends, and most specifically, please, 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 look after your colleagues. I've worked alongside people, I don't anymore, aside from my son, and I get on quite well with him. I've worked with people over the years. Some of my colleagues have driven me absolutely bananas, where to the point where I've actually gone into the toilet and shouted. Despite all of that, I don't want anyone to die in the course of their work, even those people that drove me to distraction. So I'm going to leave you with a final message from Chris Ford, because he sums up just where we need to be today. Be safe, everyone. Well said, Chris. Till tomorrow, people, go and have a good day and look after yourselves. All the best.